Hello and welcome to yet another DagsHub Added Value session. In this session, we're going to learn how to move our files from our Google Drive to DagsHub Storage. We're going to use a Google Colab notebook that was originally designed for this task. All we need to do is fill some forms, check some boxes, and run the notebook. Behind the scenes, the Google Colab notebook will copy our files from our Google Drive to Colab runtime, track them with Git and DVC, and eventually we'll push them all to DagsHub Storage. So, by that, I think we're ready to get this show on the road. So, shall we? This is my Google Drive, and I want to migrate this data directory to DagsHub, okay? And as you can see, this data directory, it's under my drive, which is if you're gonna go to your drive or whatever, this is gonna be the main directory. And then under a subdirectory that's called migrate data, okay? And now I have this DagsHub repository that I want to migrate the data to. So I have this notebook, and what I want to do, I want to clone the DagsHub repository to the Colab runtime, and then move the data from Google Drive to my Colab runtime, track the changes with DVC, and push them to DagsHub. So if you can think about it, it's like taking the DagsHub repository, cloning it to your local machine, downloading the files from Google Drive to your local machine, or having them in your local machine, moving them to the repository on your local machine, tracking those new files with DVC, and pushing them to DagsHub. So first of all, I'm going to choose to clone to pull the Git files. You can also pull the DVC files. So let's say that now you have files that you don't want them to have a collision, or maybe overwrite something that you have already in your DagsHub repository. So you can also pull all of your DVC tracked files from your repository by simply clicking or marking this box. And then you need to mount your Google Drive. So you also want to check this box. You want to initialize DVC in this repository. So you should only initialize it once. If you already initialized DVC in the repository, in your general DagsHub repository, you don't need to initialize it again. However, if you're going to mark it and try to initialize DVC again, it will simply print an error saying you're already inside the DVC directory and you can't re-initialize it again. And you would want to set the DVC remote. So once again, you need to set the DVC remote only once, because this is not being stored in your local configuration. It's being stored in your global configuration, which are being pushed to your DagsHub repository. But once again, there is no harm in checking this box, because it will only say you already have an origin set for DVC, which is DagsHub, yada, 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 okay? So once again, there is no harm in checking this box if you're not sure. And then you're checking the set DVC user, which basically based on what that you're gonna give it as input in the forms here is gonna create your DVC user configuration, okay? So let's start by running this notebook. Okay, and now I'm gonna set some environment variables for DagsHub. So first of all, the DagsHub repo owner. In my case, it's Nir Barazida. In your case, I think it's Omdena. Then I'm gonna give it the DagsHub repo name, which is test migrate data. And then my DagsHub username and the email that I used to sign up to DagsHub, okay? So let's run those cells. And the branch that you want to clone or push the data to. So let's say that we want to push it straight to master. However, if you want to push it to, I don't know, task one, data, process data or whatever, then you need to make sure that this branch already exists on DagsHub, on your Git server. If it doesn't exist yet, then you will need to clone the master branch. Then on Colab, branch out to this new branch that you want to work on, and then move forward with the notebook, okay? So I'm gonna also run this cell, and now it's gonna ask me for my DagsHub token. So you can either give it your DagsHub token that you have multiple ways to find it. You can find it on your user setting. So go to your user, your setting, and you're gonna have under the tokens your token, which you can copy, and you can also get it from the remote, clicking on the question mark under the DVC, and then you can see the token if you're going to click on this eye, and then you can manually copy it. I'm not going to show you my token because then it's going to be a security breach. So I'm simply going to use my DagsHub password. It's not recommended. I highly recommend using the token, but it's just for this demonstration. So I give it my DagsHub password. And now you want to mount your Google Drive to the Colab runtime, meaning connecting your Google Drive to Colab runtime. So I'm going to run this cell, and it's going to refer me to this link. And then this link is going to ask me which Google Drive account you want to connect. So it's near at DagsHub. And it's going to ask me to sign in. And then it's going to give me this token for this specific task. And I'm going to enter it. And this way, it's going to mount my Google Drive to Colab runtime. And now you can see that it's mounted the drive, and I can see it here. So this is all the content under my drive. It's going to be all the content of my Google Drive, and I can access it easily from my Colab runtime. And now let's configure Git in our local Colab runtime, and I'm going to clone it and pull all the Git files. So let's refresh. And now we can see that test migrate data cloned to my Google runtime, okay? And this directory is empty. Now I'm gonna upgrade pip and I'm gonna install DVC. Just note that I'm installing DVC 2.3.0 because the new version has some issues. I think in the next few days, they're gonna publish a new version of DVC, and this will not be needed. But until then, please be sure to install DVC 2.3. So I'm going to install it. And while it's going to install it, let's see what this cell does. So basically, this is going to be done automatically. You only need to run the cell, but let's understand what we're doing here. So if DVC init, it's going to initialize DVC, okay? If set a DVC remote, it's going to set a DVC remote. It's going to name it origin, and it's going to give it the URL of the DagsHub repository that you filled in the previous forms. And then if you want to set a DVC user, which this is basically a must. Why? Because you're setting, let's keep it local. The local flag means that it will be under the local DVC configurations that Git is going to ignore. And if you remember, Git is the tool that is going to track the DVC configurations, right? So all of these configurations are going to be stored in a different file, which is under the Git ignore file, and they're not going to be tracked and pushed to your DagsHub repository. Why it's so important? Because first of all, you don't want people to see your DagsHub token or password. And if you're going to push it to your DagsHub repo, it's going to be visible to all the collaborators. Secondly, you don't want to overwrite other people's configurations. So let's say that Arno is going to push his configuration, and then I'm going to push my configuration. We're going to have a conflict, right? And we don't want it. So the only configuration which is global, it's the DVC remote. I'm using the local only in this notebook. So if I'm going to go to DagsHub, you're going to see that this is the only configuration which don't have the local flag, you see? So here you don't have the local once you're adding the remote. I'm only using it in the Colab notebook just to avoid conflicts, okay? And later, it asks if you want to pull your DVC track files from your storage. And if so, it's gonna pull it, and then it's gonna re-pull it to make sure that everything is up to date. The only reason that I'm doing it twice because I'm using the dev null, which basically is gonna not show all the prints that DVC prints while it's downloading or pulling files. Why did I use it? Because it's like tons of prints and it doesn't show or printed out very nicely on Colab. So I decided to use this hack. Okay, so everything is installed. And now I'm gonna run this cell. So you can see it initialized DVC successfully because I didn't have DVC on my local, in my remote directory. And this is the Git Push Command, which basically is, it's a function to push your files to the Git storage. So I'm gonna add a few cells here to see the Git status. And I would want to, you know what, this is a pop quiz. So if I'm gonna run, I initialize DVC, and now I'm running Git status. So if I'm gonna run the Git status, you will see all the new DVC configurations that were created by the DVC init command. And basically, I would just like add them to Git. So git add.dvc and .dvc ignore. And I'm gonna also commit them. So git commit -m init dvc, okay? So basically, you don't need to add those two commands or those two cells because I think DVC is already initialized in your repository. If it wasn't, then you only need to do it once, if you remember. So if no one initialized DVC, then simply initialize it, track the changes with Git, and push it to DagsHub. So you'll have DVC already initialized in your repository. And now to the fun part, okay? So now we're going to transfer our files from Google Drive to DagsHub Storage. And now I want to enter the target directory that I want to transfer the directory to, okay? So as you can see, this path doesn't have the target directory, but the directory in which it's going to hold the directory that I want to transfer, okay? So it doesn't have the data name, okay? This is important. It only has the parent directory that I want to transfer the data to. So I'm gonna, I filled this form and I'm gonna run this cell. And now it's gonna create this parent directory here. So as you can see, this was the repository. And under this repository, it created this parent directory that named task0 raw data, okay? The same as I insert here. And now we want to give it the path in our Google Drive that to the directory that we want to transfer. So if I'm going to go back to my Google Drive, you can see that the path is migrate data and then data. Don't add my drive, just migrate data and then data. This is the directory that I want to transfer. So moving back to the Colab notebook, you see that I have the migrate data and the data directory. So I'm going to run this form. And now what this cell is going to do is going to simply copy the entire tree from the input path to the destination path, okay? And if this data directory has subdirectories in it, whatever, it's going to also copy them. So I'm going to run this cell. I need to, it doesn't have copy because we're doing it anyway. Okay, and now if I'm going to go to my task0 raw data, I'm going to see that data directory. And inside the data directory, I'm going to see all the different files. So you see I have an audio file, I have an image file, and I have a CSV file, okay? Now what I want to do, I want to track those files using DVC. So I'm going to track the data directory with DVC, the same as if I would do it on my local directory. So I'm going to start with the Git status and let's see what changed. And as you can see, this new directory was created. And now I want to track, I don't want to track this directory. I want to track the data directory in this directory, right? So you can either use the desk directory path, and let's see what it contains. So you see it contains the directory that holds the data. I can simply use it to track my data directory. And now, as you can see, DVC gives me all the files that were modified because of implementing this command or running this command, the add command. And I'm simply going to use git to track the pointer file and the new git ignore. So git add task 0 yada 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 .dvc, which is the pointer file, and the git ignore file. I added a warning here, so if you don't want to copy and paste those commands, you can simply use the git all command. But warning, it's gonna add all the file and directories to git tracking. And you need to make sure that this is what you want to do. And there is a reason that it's commented out. So as Joanne is marking with her face no, and she's terrified of doing it, you should also be terrified in just simply adding everything to Git. You need to do it only if you're sure that you want to add all of the different files to Git that were modified or weren't tracked by Git, okay? So it's better implementation to simply specify the files that you want Git to track, okay? Next, I'm gonna commit the changes, so move files, so okay, let's be more specific, move the data dir to DagsHub Storage. And now let's run git status. And I see that we're working on a clean tree and there's nothing to commit. And we're all set to push our file to DagsHub, right? So let's comment this 2 lines out. And the first one is gonna push all of our Git files to DagsHub. And the second one will push all of our files to DagsHub. But I'm gonna do a trick and I'm gonna comment this one out. And I'm gonna push it, only the DVC files, to DagsHub. And now it's gonna push them. It's gonna be very fast because I don't have a lot of files. And now I'm gonna go to DagsHub and I'm gonna refresh my repository. And I'm gonna see that nothing changed. And oh boy, did I do something wrong. So if you remember from our walkthrough session, DagsHub is using the pointer file to show you the data files, right? So if it doesn't have the pointer files, you won't be able to see the data files. So it's the same for branches. So think about it. Why don't you see if you remember the branch with the adaptive threshold data, why can't you see it on master branch? Because the master branch don't have the pointer file to this data file, okay? So DagsHub takes all the pointer files on the branch, is parsing your storage, and is presenting only the file that has those pointer files are pointing to. If you don't have the pointer file on the branch that you're trying to see or on the Git server, then you won't be able to see the data file. So what I need to do next, I'm going to simply push the pointer files with Git. So I'm going to go back to my notebook. I'm going to comment out the Git push function, and I'm going to call it. And now I use Git to push all the files, and I'm going to go to my DagsHub repository. I'm going to refresh it, and voila, I have my data file. So if I'm going to go to task 0 data and to the data files, I'm going to see all the data files that I pushed with DVC. And I can also parse them and see them using the DagsHub catalog. So the first one is audio, and this is pretty cool and a very new feature that we have. So you can see the file, the audio spectrogram. You can see the audio wave. So if I'm going to click on play, you'll also be able to listen to the audio file. And this is pretty awesome. Next, if I'm going to click on next, I'm going to be able to see the image, which you're already familiar with, which is the Excel image. And next is going to lead me to the CSV file, okay? And this is basically it. And this is how you can use it. So basically, all you need to do to use this notebook is simply edit only the forms. So this file, this cell, and this cell, etc. And don't touch any of the other cells. And you're set to go and transfer automatically or semi-automatic your data from your Google Drive to your DagsHub Storage. So basically, you would need to first start by cloning the master branch. So don't change the master branch. Okay. So we cloned everything and we installed DVC and initialized it, yada, yada, yada. And we pulled everything. And now we want to create a new branch and then track the data on this branch and push it using this branch. So what you need to do is run git check out the name of the branch. So task 0 raw data. So git checkout -b, okay? -b is a branch, it means a branch. And task 0 raw data, okay? It's gonna create a new branch and it's gonna check out to this branch. And now you can see it switched to task 0. And now you're gonna continue doing your thing the same way that you did it here, okay? But when you want to push it, I think you need to set it up as set upstream. It's gonna present you the message. So let's see if I'm gonna use this. It's gonna probably show me the message, and I'm gonna. So basically, you can simply push it. And now, if I'm gonna go to DagsHub, I'm gonna refresh it. I will see this new branch. Yes. Right click on the shared directory, and then you're gonna have an option, add shortcut to drive. And this is gonna add a shortcut to your drive. And once you're gonna mount your Google Drive to Colab runtime, you will see this hyperlink to this shared directory. By that, we reach to the end of this added value session. I wanna thank you all for joining. If you want to learn more about DagsHub or the tool integration that we have, such as DVC or MLflow, I added some link in this video description below. If you have any requests for additional content that you want me to record, please feel free to reach out on our Discord or leave a comment to this video and I'll make sure to review it. And until our next added value session, Dags out.